Hello and welcome to Firearm Freedom. This is going to be another Gun Store Customer 101 video. In today's video, we are going to be talking about buying a suppressor. And before we get this video started, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to this brand new channel sponsor that I have, which is Gray Man Tactical. They make a few really cool different organizers that are capable of accepting a wide variety of things. Primarily, what I was interested most in is their RMP series, and it's designed to go on the back of your car seat. I can put a fire extinguisher, road flares, medical. I have other AR mags in there. They don't pay me for this ad space. I am an affiliate with them. So if you want to support the channel, use the link down in the description below, and better yet, I have a discount code for you. GMT10 gets you 10% off of your order. Anything you purchase seriously helps me out, and I can't thank you enough. Gun Store Customer 101. I am so excited you guys enjoyed that last video last week in this series so much that I decided to do another video in this playlist because I think this is going to go pretty far. There's a lot of questions that I get asked daily working at a gun store. Now, this question is a little bit more on the advanced side of things, but I know a lot of people are considering suppressors and they really don't know how to go about it. And frequently, daily almost, I get people coming into a gun store and they see a case full of suppressors and they say, well, geez, I didn't even know those were legal. So I think some of these answers are probably going to help a few folks out. First and foremost, I want to touch on the common misconception that you need a Class 3 license to own or buy a suppressor. People will come into the gun store and they heard around a gun range or from buddy such and such, that's a police officer that, they think is an expert, and they say, hey, I know you got to get a Class 3 license for these, right? No, you do not. There is no such thing as a Class 3 license that you can get to just simply buy suppressors as much as you would like without any sort of a wait, and you also do not need to obtain a Class 3 license in order to buy a suppressor. What you are doing when you buy a suppressor is simply registering the suppressor from the shop to you on the National Firearms Act registry that is held by the ATF. It's a crappy system. It shouldn't exist. We know all of that. I've made videos about that previously, but that is what you have to do. The common misconception is that in order for a gun store to sell suppressors or other NFA items as a business, they will commonly get what is referred to as a Class 3 license, or in other words, just an FFL and SOT that allows them to deal and sometimes manufacture NFA items. So that's the first huge common misconception that I see. You are not getting a license, you are filling out what is called a Form 4, and that process is the exact same for every single suppressor you want to buy. So if you want to buy 3 or 4, you're doing that 3 or 4 times individually, and they're all going out. Secondly, what I get the most is, are those legal? I thought those were illegal. Did they just make those legal? I thought those have been illegal for years. Suppressors have been legal to own in most states for their entire existence. So you have been legally able to own a suppressor, and for the most part, if you can pass a background check to purchase a firearm, you are going to be able to pass the background check to purchase a suppressor. They are essentially the exact same things. The only thing that sometimes happens is there's issues with communication from ATF and FBI, and that's a whole other story for a different day. But yes, they are legal in most states. There are a few unfortunate states out there. Generally speaking, if your state has an assault weapons ban, you are probably not going to be able to buy a suppressor. Once those things are out of the way, you have to simply choose a suppressor. A lot of people don't really understand that part. They think they can start the paperwork process or the Form 4 process before choosing the suppressor. Unfortunately, because one check is happening with one NFA item, there has to be a serial number associated with that Form 4. So, say you want to order a suppressor. The suppressor has to arrive in the gun store before that paperwork process gets started, unless you are using companies like Silencer Central or Silencer Shop. Those processes are a little bit different in that aspect. Just like choosing a firearm in a gun store, you have to go in and simply choose what suppressor that you want to buy. Once you choose that suppressor, you will then pay for the suppressor in full, and then you're going to be able to start the paperwork process. Unfortunately, the suppressor has to be paid for entirely in 99% of gun shops out there. This is not a federal requirement per se. It's just the gun shop will do this because if they give you the grace of paying for it after the paperwork gets started, it's quite the headache if the customer decides to not pay for it and the ATF paperwork is already submitted. The reason for this is because the ATF does not care who has paid for or not paid for the suppressor. They are currently registering that in that process in that individual's name, so everything has to be voided. It's kind of a big deal. There is an additional $200 flat tax stamp fee, an extortion fee, if you will, in order to buy a suppressor. And that is not paid to the gun shop directly, that is paid to the ATF. The only time that you are paying a gun shop per se or an online source for the $200 tax stamp is companies like Silencer Shop that are handling most of these things electronically via third party in that situation. So most of the time, you're going to be paying that $200 directly to the ATF. The ATF, if you are doing an e-form 4 system on their website, can only accept credit card or debit card, no ifs, ands, or buts. If you're doing paper, the ATF can accept a money order, a personal check, or they can accept a credit card. They cannot accept cash or any other form of payment. And if you are sending a check or you are paying by credit card, usually if you're doing paper, it will take about 7 to 10 days for them to either cash the check or charge the card, and I would strongly recommend sending out those forms via tracking through whatever service you're using to mail those so that you can see and make sure that they have arrived at the ATF. If you do not see a $200 charge on your credit card that you used or your check cashed within about 3 weeks, that's your sign that those forms did not arrive. That's a huge indicator that your check and process has been started. It does not mean it's going to be approved soon. It means that it has been started and received by the ATF. In my notes here, I have say no to Silencer Shop. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that use Silencer Shop and don't have any issues with it. For me personally, I'm not a huge fan. I have seen a lot of problems on the back end working for a shop that does not use Silencer Shop primarily for their Form 4 filing, and I have worked for shops that do use Silencer Shop primarily. What I've seen with Silencer Shop is it just simply adds a third hand in the pot where it does not need to be there. More so now with Silencer Shop, if I'm not mistaken, unless they've changed something, you have to file via the ATF e-form system, which at this point is a horrendous system. If a shop uses solely a Silencer Shop kiosk, I would go as far as saying I would strongly recommend to go to a store that has their own process, because there are quite a few of those stores out there. This would not apply if you live in a very, very rural area where there are not really any gun stores, and even fewer of those gun stores deal in NFA items. NFA items on the side of gun stores is a massive headache. There's almost no gain for a gun store dealing in suppressors or other NFA items. It's much more of a headache than it's worth. And because of that, there are not many shops out there that carry suppressors, let alone know good amounts of information about suppressors, and also file those forms themselves. Now, I am lucky enough to work at a shop that does that, so we're able to help people out a lot in understanding those things, and I've been able to learn a lot. If you're in that situation, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to use Silencer Shop or Silencer Central in order to do those things. And I can promise you, you should not listen to the information that's still being marketed that ATF E-Form 4s are taking 90 days. You are looking at 8 to 10 months regardless. So just remember that. You heard me mention there why I prefer paper over E-Form 4s. The biggest issue of this still, I've talked about this in my E-Form 4 video, is that they might be changing that because we received a weird email about E-Form 4 corrections about 2 days ago, so that might be updated, but as of right now, there are no easy routes of corrections on E-Form 4s. That's a huge issue. You could wait all of 10 months and find out that a character was missed somewhere and you need to resubmit the whole process and start from scratch back at day one. Right now, paper forms are about 8.5 months. That's when I just received the most recent one back. They still allow corrections like normal, and I still believe that there are a lot less people submitting paper, and there have been a lot less people submitting paper, so I still believe that the paper form 4 times are going to consistently decrease, whereas the E-Form 4 times are going to increase. Most shops, unfortunately, are not going to have great information about suppressors. Sometimes they're not going to have any information about suppressors. So don't walk into your local Bass Pro Shop or Cabela's and assume that those individuals behind the counter are even going to know what a suppressor is, let alone if they're legal and which ones to get. You might get lucky with a big box chain store employee that just knows what they're talking about and still chooses to work at a big box store like that. But when in doubt, you're going to have a hard time finding a store that's going to have good, viable information about suppressors. So you may have to go online. There are a bunch of different online outlets, whether it be here on YouTube or other areas out there, forums, things like that, that you can figure out what suppressor is going to be the best for you. Which suppressor do you buy first? Why? How do they sound? What are the decibel ratings and other things? Is that even important to pay attention to? All of those questions are questions that you should be searching prior to going into a gun store to make sure you're well informed, because this is quite the process. It's not something that you want to just run into and choose the only thing that the store has, or find something online that's $99 and makes crazy claims that it's going to be great when it's really not. It's a long process. It's not an easy item to just get rid of or sell. So because of that, you want to spend the money, save up a good amount to get a good suppressor. Pro tip, that's going to be probably between $500 and $700 for the suppressor, and then add on an additional $200 tax stamp. And just make sure it's going to fit all the requirements that you want in your suppressor purchase. Next, we can talk about if you want to file via a trust or individual. A gun shop is going to ask you that. At this point in time, in 2023, most people, including myself, even though I have a family and other people that I want to take those items after I pass away, I file individual. A trust, really the only benefit of a trust, is if you want multiple people to have ownership of that suppressor and not just you. What do I mean by ownership and possession of that suppressor? If you file it individual, you are the only one, even if you're legally married, even if you live with other people, you are the only one that can handle that suppressor at all times. There are some catches to that. If you want to bring it to the range and let other people shoot it while you're there, that is no problem at all. But as far as maintaining possession of that item, you're the only one. When you leave and go to work, it has to be locked in an area that only you have access to. So this falls kind of under an issue there of home defense. If you're married with somebody that you want to be able to grab a home defense firearm with a suppressor, you may need a trust. Or if you have a son or daughter that's older that wants to take that suppressor and bring it with them to the mountains for the weekend or go on a hunting trip with your suppressor, you will want a trust. However, if those things do not apply to you, you're probably going to want to file individual. If you want to file via a trust, you're going to have to pay a little bit more money to create a trust, and I would highly recommend going with a firearms attorney to make that trust. They're going to make sure that it's all encompassing and is not just some crappy $50 or $100 trust that's really not going to cover anything anyways. A lot of people are going to tell you you want a trust so that the government doesn't come and take those items after you pass away. That's not the case. You can file what is called, or your estate can file what is called a Form 5 transfer. Now, that's not as easy as having a trust, but it is free of a tax stamp and can be done on all of those items, and it's an even easier process if those items are willed to a certain individual. When the estate person is handling all that, that's what they're going to do. And the pro tip, if you are going to do trust, please listen to my warning. You want to have yourself as the only person on that trust when you are going to buy your items. Buy all the suppressors, all the NFA items that you want to, with only yourself on the trust. Then, once you've kind of spoken to yourself and you say, I have everything I want to have, add on all the people you want to add on. That's a little trick of the trade, because if you do it that way, all the people that you add on are not going to have to go through the fingerprint process, the paperwork process. It's just simply amending the trust, adding them on, and they're good to go. If you make a trust and add your wife, your brother, your kids, your cousins, your buddies, each and every one of those people are going to have to come in with you and do the paperwork process that you are doing to purchase said suppressor. It is a nightmare, and again, I warned you. Listen to the warning. Don't do it. I promise you'll thank me later. The last two things I want to talk about are kind of one and the same, and it's common courtesy stuff, right? It's the same sort of situation of going into any sort of an establishment 5 minutes before they close, as they're starting to get everything ready to close up for the night. You don't want to be that person. Please don't be that person. I've been in retail my entire adult life, and that's never a fun day. When you're buying suppressors, if you want to help the shop out, understand that buying multiple items all at the same time does not make it easier. If you want to buy 4 suppressors, that's great. You're rolling in the money. I get it. But 4 suppressors means that entire paperwork process, which is 9 forms if you're doing it individual, if you're doing it paper, all at one time, but you're just simply timesing that number by the amount of suppressors that you have. So instead of it just being 9, now we're adding on another 9 and another 9 and another 9 for all of those suppressors. And a lot of people don't get that. They say, well, I just want to get it all done today. We say, okay, and you're looking at a lot of forms lined up all over the counter. Now, I know a lot of you are screaming in the camera, well, Joe, what if you do e-forms? It's easy that way. It's not, because the ATF e-forms website is constantly crashing, constantly not communicating, and constantly making it incredibly difficult to file a Form 4. On top of that, if you miss something, the whole thing gets kicked back 10 months later. So it's rather stressful to make sure that you got everything on there. So if you want to buy multiple suppressors, sometimes it's nice to spread it out a few days. Ask the gun store if you can kind of schedule it out. If you live far away, it is what it is. If you live close to the gun store, say, hey, can I do one set of paperwork today, maybe another in a few days, and we'll send it all out when it's all done, maybe a week from now. Spreads it out. It'll be easier for you, easier for the shop, and I guarantee you, whoever you're working with is probably going to thank you for it. The same rule applies for this last point I want to talk about, which is filing with a trust with multiple people. You're going to want to ask the shop, hey, can we schedule something out? Because I got news for you, an 8-person trust to buy a suppressor is almost not even worth it at that point. So call the shop, ask. Don't just show up on a busy Saturday with 8 of your relatives and friends that you want to do fingerprints, photos, and fill out the paperwork process. Just common courtesy stuff. Call the shop ahead of time, and that's exactly why I am putting this information in a Gun Store Customer 101. A lot of people don't know this. A lot of people don't understand how much work goes into an NFA transfer. Guys, that is going to wrap up this Gun Store 101 video. Let me know down in the comment section below. What do you want to see next? What are common questions that you have? Do you have questions that sometimes you don't want to ask a gun store employee because you're unsure? Put them down below. I will answer them for you in a full-out video series, and I seriously can't thank you guys enough. While you're down there, head up to that description, check out the links to support the video, and as always, stay tuned for more great content coming soon.